All right, let's get to our power rankings here. Joe, I think we need to preface this every single week just in case. These are not rankings. These are power ratings based off of how we have seen things, based off our analytical data that we use in reference to putting our top 10 opponents where we see fit. I'm going to go over to you first. Who are your top 10 teams power rated?
My top 10 that I've got here. If you haven't noticed, folks, I barely changed a thing from last week. Number one,
Utah. That's about it.
Yeah, I took USC out. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Texas. Number 3, Ohio State. Number 4, Tennessee. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Miami. Number 7, Ole Miss. Number 8, Oregon. Number 9, Missouri. And then number 10, Utah.
So I don't really hate anything that you put, and especially I don't hate it in the order that you have it. The only question is, Joe, and a team that we have not been able to talk about much, okay, that you have on yours is Missouri. Joe, I mean, you can't look at them and say, like, look, man, you got in a dogfight with Boston College. You got in a dogfight with Vandy. Who are you?
Well, okay, but Boston College, I don't think is indicting. The Vanderbilt game is bad. But here's the thing, and yours, and you'll show yours in a second. Penn State's there's not a lot of good teams to pick from at the top. That's the thing. And if once we get to like 10, it's kind of a who's who. I think there's a lot of teams that are going through some issues, but you have Penn State in there. Same argument could be made for Penn State where they played poorly against Bowling Green. I don't think there's a right answer. That's my whole point. Is this one of the few times where I'm not going to come at you and say, no, this pick is the right pick. I don't think there's a right answer.
I'm not trying to do that. If I am, I'm sorry. I'm not trying
No. I'm not saying that you were. I'm just saying that I'm not going to do that to you.
Now, I'll give Missouri this to back off of what I just said and to double down. Boston College win doesn't look too bad right now, does it?
I think it looks great. I mean, this Boston College team it's a strong team that is top 5 in the ACC right now.
I'm going to tell you, there was a team that I have really started to keep my eye on. They're not in the top 10, so I'm going to give you mine, but I got to mention them too in reference to my top 10. But here's my top 10, Joe. Pretty much the same as you, man. Georgia at 1, Texas 2, Ohio State 3, Tennessee 4, Bama 5, Miami at 6. We both have the same order through 7 with Ole Miss. Number 8, Oregon. Number 9, Penn State. And number 10, the Clemson Tigers.
I don't love Clemson being in there. I gotta be completely honest.
I knew you wouldn't.
I need to see them beat somebody with a pulse. You know, like I need to. NC State with their backup quarterback in. You're beating up on App State. I get it. They've been impressive the past 2 weeks offensively. I will absolutely give Dabo some credit and Garrett Riley some credit, but I'm not ready to go top 10 yet, man. Like I would keep USC in there before I'd put Clemson in there.
No, because I think the reason I wouldn't is because Georgia blanking them the way that they did is very different than Michigan not being able to throw the football and you still losing. I think that's a vastly different scenario that we're talking about here in a loss, right? Like Joe,
USC's been tested more though. They've had more difficult opponents.
Fair, but they also have a worse loss than what Clemson does. But to your point, I agree. But here's the thing that I look at with Clemson that I just want to throw out there. What if Georgia goes out there this weekend and really handles business against Bama? Like I'm not saying that Bama is going to look like Clemson in what they're doing at all. I think that game's going to be relatively close. I got a field goal game. Joe, I actually got it 24-21 Georgia in this game. But regardless of that, I look at this and say to myself, like, hey, man, that defensive front is still really good. Now, Joe, people will look at stats and say, well, they don't have a lot of sacks. Joe, they're number 1 in the country in havoc rate. They're number 1 in the country in not creating separation from DBs to receivers. I'm leaning on their defense. Is their offense finally figuring something out? I don't know. But I just don't know if there is I don't know on a neutral field that Clemson can't. I feel like Clemson and Missouri are the same type of team. And here's another thing. If Cam Rising's not at Utah and he's not playing for Utah at the current moment, I do think Clemson could beat him.
Well, okay, so this is why I put Utah in there. By the way, to not steer the conversation too far away for a quick second here. The fact that Utah is running the table, they're undefeated, and they beat Oklahoma State, which is supposed to be one of the top Big 12 teams, without their starting quarterback, I think really is a signal of eliteness. I'm not saying that they are a top 5 team that's going to go on to win a national title. Not what I'm saying. But have they, and we talked about this in the segment, have they proven to me that they are separating themselves from the rest of the pack in the Big 12? Absolutely. I think that defense is unlike anything that the Big 12 is going to see the entirety of the year and has seen in some time, because that conference does not know what good defense looks like. For them to win without Cam Rising is a shining spot for me. But comes with the caveat of we don't know Cam Rising's availability for the rest of the year.
And that's my point. So, like, if we go out to Council Bluffs, Iowa tomorrow, and these two teams line up on a neutral field, who are you taking? Like, I'm legitimately asking. Clemson versus Utah, neutral site.
You're saying that there is no Cam Rising available?
Well, I mean, considering on what we know at the current moment, which this could easily change, but let's say that he's not because he didn't play last week for just happenstance. Who are you taking?
I'm picking Clemson in that situation, but if Utah has Cam Rising, I'm picking Utah to beat Clemson.
That's fair, but they don't have him right now, and that's the point that I'm trying to lean on. I can't put – even though Utah is undefeated and their run game and defense has been very elite, Clemson's defense has also been very good, and ironically, I just trust Cade Klubnik a little bit more than Isaac Wilson at the current moment. That shouldn't be a hot take, considering Wilson – threw 2 picks and was a little messy. And look, I got to give Klubnik credit, man. He's looking like he's getting better. He's starting to look better on a week-to-week basis. And the thing with him is they're not doing this against bad teams and dunking the ball off. Joey's throwing the ball down the field. And I got to say this. I don't know if they figured out things at receiver. I'm not saying that they have. What I do know is what they look like right now offensively is completely different than what they looked like last year against these same level of opponents. So that's just what I want to throw out there and just make clear. Anything else, or where do you want to go now in our power rankings? Because you and I have the same 1 through 7.
I feel like there could be maybe a level of impatience from Tennessee fans that are frustrated after the game that they had, that they couldn't be moving up ahead of Ohio State. I had a debate with myself of maybe doing it. I got to admit this here for our Ohio State fans that tune in. I do feel still a little dirty just keeping them there at 3, because they're really the only team in those top 5s that we both have that haven't played anyone. They haven't been tested. They haven't really faced an ounce of adversity, and I don't think that they're going to face any adversity against Michigan State. They have the makings of being the 3rd best team in the country. I don't want to keep dropping them because they haven't played anyone. I think that's a little bit too reactive based on scheduling. But Tennessee's right there. If we had to do like a 3A, 3B, I think Tennessee is right there.
Here's the thing about these early rankings, right? Mm-hmm. The thing about these early rankings is easy to me because they're going to play themselves out. Like, for example, I look at both of what we have here for Tennessee, okay? You're not above Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. Well, you're not going to be favored against any one of those opponents, right? So, I think Georgia's still more talented. I think Texas is still more talented. I think Ohio State is more talented than they are. And Joe, I think that even though that we have Tennessee at 4, I think it's not bombastic to leave them there and put them there. I think Alabama fans would be the ones that come in here and say, Tennessee above us? What if we beat Georgia this week?
Well, there's going to be a huge jump, and I've said this before. If Alabama
or a huge decrease.
No, if they lose to Georgia, I'm not moving them. They're staying right where they are.
Put them behind Miami?
No, because who has Miami played?
But Joe, that's not necessarily how my I think of how my power and how we do.
I know. I understand that we're not. This isn't resume based, but we're trying to contextualize performances. So if Alabama loses a close game to Georgia and they play well, and they don't, they're not playing like crap and making a bunch of mistakes, I think they've earned the right to stay where they are at 5 or 6 or somewhere in that range. I mean, heck, if this thing comes down to the wire and it's like a field goal or a late touchdown, I might even move them up. that against one of the most talented teams in the country, if you're able to still hang in there in the last final minutes, this is one of the most important games of the year.
A loss doesn't necessarily dictate that. But see, here's the thing that I am with Miami, and here's the argument that I'm tired of already hearing. Guys, they're going to get 2 or 3 losses. This isn't the same team. They don't have the same quarterback. And it's about time for people, now that we're going into week 5, to wrap their minds around that.
Around Miami,
yes. I mean, Joe, what do they do? I mean, Joe, both of their fronts are pretty freaking good. So, I mean, like if Alabama can't run the ball on Georgia, hypothetically speaking, it's not like Miami's defensive line and front 7 is worse. I mean, they're really not. Miami's front 7 is insanely good. That's the part that I'm trying to make here. I think that we are Joe, we have a common opponent between Miami and Alabama, right? And I know transitive property is not an equal thing. But I look at Miami and say, well, you know what, man? One quarterback's probably a little bit better than the other. And I'm talking about Cam Ward. And so those are like the specific things that I look at Miami. I'm like, the only thing that I have to go off of is you have one common opponent and one absolutely handle the other.
One thing that's going to be an issue with Miami, and there's going to be a lot of people that come out of
fans not showing up, hold on, stop. We are thinking about all of our friends and viewers in the state of Florida with Hurricane Helene on the way. We're thinking of it.
Yeah, stay safe. But I think with Miami though, they have the easiest schedule out of any of these teams in this top 10 conversation.
Very fair.
It's going to be extremely hard to be able to evaluate how good this Miami team really is until they play in the ACC championship game. I don't think I'm going to move Miami very high for most of the year. Miami fans should be understanding of that. You know, you should be understanding of, and with the 12-team playoff, I think it's also like you almost don't care. It's to your benefit that you get to the ACC championship game and you get better every single week and you're blowing through this weak-ass schedule. You win the ACC championship game and then you get yourself a nice fancy bye. Like that's what the goal is. Your goal, and you shouldn't be upset over not being ranked number 1 or number 2 or number 3. As long as you're in the top 6, 7 conversation and you win the ACC, you get a bye.
It doesn't really
a good matchup.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what we say.
Yeah.
We brought up Penn State. Any thoughts on them? I have them in there. You don't. Your thought?
We said this in the preview a little bit. I think that that Penn State versus Illinois is another one of these kind of gut check test games because Illinois, we know defensively, man, they've got playmakers. Their secondary is extremely underrated. Actually, it's very gifted. It deserves recognition. Their defensive line super physical. If the issues that they had against Bowling Green show up again and this game is close and Illinois covers that 18-point spread that's been put out there, I feel much better about Penn State. But this is one of those scenarios where it is a tough out type of a matchup that they're going to scratch and claw until the very end of it.
And if they do win?
If Penn State wins?
Yeah,
I mean, they're going to win. I just don't know if I'm really going to move them up much further. Depends how they win. They blow them out. Yeah, I'm going to move them up. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.
I understand what you're saying, but here's the problem that I have with what both of us are saying here. You got Oregon at 8. I got Oregon at 8. The issue that I have in this specific situation is it feels as if that we're penalizing Penn State for something Oregon also did too.
Well, no. Well, wait, I'm not leaving Penn State where they are.
Fairness, Oregon's a field goal attempt at the buzzer away from losing to Boise State here now.
That's okay. But here's the difference, though. Boise State has a high chance of being the G5 representative. Bowling Green does not. Bowling Green is
what about
not
Idaho?
going to be.
What about Idaho? They're an FCS team. They beat them by 14. So I understand your logic in reference to the Bowling Green game. I really, really, really do. But we can't have them. We can't have Oregon at 8 in this power ranking, the both of us, and say this is a hit on Penn State and not say it's a hit on Oregon. Because 2 weeks ago, me and you came out here when they were going in to play Oregon State, who's not a great team right now in and of themselves too, and said, hey, man, I mean, Oregon's, they're kind of slipping here. So I understand the logic of what you're saying, but I don't want to penalize Penn State for a team that we have in our top 10 that's also had saying – so, I mean, Joe, they beat Idaho by 14. I mean, that's a blimp in and of itself. I know that it's game one, but these power rankings do have to mean something.
No, it does mean something, and I think that to answer that question is like, are you getting better every single week? Since
are they
bad performance? I mean, the Oregon State game that they had, I think, was an indicator that they got better. What do you mean? They kicked the shit out of Oregon State.
Yeah, but I could also make that same argument for Penn State.
They played great against.
Let me say this.
Wait, hold on. I think that there's a different conversation between the two of them because it's Oregon, new faces, a ton of new faces, new quarterback, and they hit their stride against Oregon State, and then let's see where it goes from there. Penn State's been a little bit inconsistent. I'm not saying that they're bad, but they have been a little bit inconsistent to this point. Which version of Penn State shows up against Illinois? Is it the
neutral site? Where would you have them? Who would you pick?
I'd pick Oregon.
I think it would be about a 1 point spread if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think it'd be a pick 'em, but I would pick Oregon.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I think Oregon beats Utah. These teams that are there that we would have to pick on, I don't know. Joe, before we wrap this up, I got to bring up two teams in here.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on UCF and thoughts on Indiana? I mean, Coach Cignetti at Indiana, I got to throw this out there, Joe. I mean, I know that they probably won't crack our top 10 this season. God, dog, they look so much more impressive than I thought that they would coming into the season.
UCF, I want to see how they play against Colorado.
Again, I want to see how they play against Florida.
Well, that's going to be an interesting game too. Again, admittedly, I don't know what they're fully capable of.
You better get eyes on them, brother.
We're so early on into the year. But I brought this up before, man. I had to go against Kurt Cignetti 3 times in my career when he was the head coach at Elon and then he was the head coach at James Madison, and he beat the hell out of us. They completely.
All I do is win, baby. Paisans. The Paisans, Joe.
Completely embarrassed us. He's one of the most confident coaches that you're going to ever hear speak, and that actually backs it up on the field. I like his personality, minus the fact that he embarrassed my team when we played against him. He's a great coach. And for him to take Curtis Rourke and turn him into what he's been so far, he's just a good motivator. I think that's what all that is. And I'm curious, I really, you know what I'm rooting for? I am rooting for Julian Lewis to end up there, who has been recruited by them and has a tie to the offensive coordinator, who has been recruiting him since he was in middle school. I think that would be so freaking cool if they pulled off a high four-star recruit like that. I'm rooting for him. I think it'd be fun. I love it when these teams like Rutgers and Indiana and UCF are competitive and are highly ranked.
Here come the Hoosiers. No more just being a basketball school. I said this last week and got some pushback, but I thought it was still funny. Make Italian coaches great again.